Sentinel was scared to return to the Tempest house. He didn't want a repeat of Vax. He was hoping that Amara would be accepting, but expected the worst. When he did eventually return, he did so at the front door, knocking. Ayla answered the door, and she was surprised to see him. "Amara?" she called out for her sister. "He's back." The Sentinel made a conscious decision to travel to their home about a week after he left, to give time for Amara to adjust. Amara ran to the door and stopped behind Ayla when her eye caught the Sentinel. He waited for the worst. "Don't ever leave me again," Amara laughed. She ran up to the Sentinel and tackle-hugged him. He struggled to stay standing and hugged back after a delayed reaction. "Amara, I didn't think you'd be this quick to adjust." "I knew it was you, you idiot," she smiled, crying into his shoulder. "What?" The Sentinel was confused. "That day the world ended when the Paradox Master, when you came to save the day, he gave me a look. Vax saw it too. I think she had the same hunch I did. That was the first day I met you. I've had all this time." "So you knew this whole time?" The Sentinel pushed away to see her eyes. She led him into the house. "I had a hunch, and when I figured out what phasing was, when I saw how you acted around me, something about that was unsettling. But I think at that moment I knew for sure. And when I saw my dad's jacket in my closet..." The Sentinel didn't say anything. "Don't leave me, please." Amara rested her head against the Sentinel's shoulder. "I need you." "I don't think you're safe with me, especially now. I'm not even sure I'm a Sentinel anymore." "I'm sane with you." Amara closed her eyes. "I think you need to learn to trust yourself more." "Easier said than done." The Sentinel leaned his head over Amara's. "I know." What was now becoming a common occurrence, the Sentinel got another hollow message from Daru on the box.
"Sentinel, I heard the news."
Daru laughed as his greeting. "Did the Paradox Master tell you?" The Sentinel smirked.
"Huh, don't you mean did you tell me?" No, this isn't new to me, actually. I've known for quite some time."
"Who else has known?" The Sentinel became curious.
"You did. Your first incarnation, always traveling with the Paradox Master during those 5 years. Inseparable friends, the two of you. The other night, actually, at the party. That was one's last night of those 5 years."
"Oh. So what are you calling for?" The Sentinel adjusted the box's position so that he could see the hologram better.
"Well, we've got a few scares recently regarding a potential attack on Janistar."
Daru's mood quickly shifted. "Really?"
"And our military strongly advises me to get your help, just in case."
"What kind of scares?" the Sentinel asked.
"A lot of rumors popping up in town. Mostly about Rogar and small tidbits here and there about Conchna. Sounds like they have some sort of plan to end it once and for all."
"I'll be right over there."
"Thank you."
Daru nodded, and the hologram cut out. The box floated up and spun around.
"So, to Janistar?"
The Sentinel turned around and looked at Amara. "What do you say? Let's try out the new Sentinel, shall we?" The two of them flashed away to Janistar, appearing right next to Daru.
"That was quick,"
Daru commented on their arrival. "Time travel," the Sentinel reminded him.
"Right.
"So where are we?" The Sentinel looked around. The only buildings in sight seemed to be bunkers. The ground was the same familiar black dust, and it was cold. The horizon was lined with a bright blue, despite the pitch-black sky. A singular ribbon of cosmic lights broke the monotony of the sky above. I'm guessing one of the poles, because of the lights?
"Right. Military base, stationed right underneath the hole in our radioactive shield."
Daru floated around on his platform, and gestured with 3 of his 6 stubby arms for the Sentinel and Amara to follow him.
"As far as strategic points of attack, this is the only one for our enemy."
Daru stopped by a military general and tried his best to salute with his stubby arms, none of which reached his head. The general said, "The radioactive shield around us isn't the only one we have. We've set up anti-teleport shields, as well as an antimatter shield. Nothing can pass through, except from that point." She pointed in the sky. Above her floated a massive torus-shaped space station, with some sort of shield gate inside it. That space station acts as a gate that seals all our shields together. "You said anti-teleport, but we were allowed in?" Amara said.
"Right, but we have a whitelist,"
Daru interrupted. "Whitelists are hackable," Amara pointed out. "Only from the inside, and nothing smart enough to hack the system can make it through those antimatter shields," the general assured them confidently.
"Except terrors."
The box decided to join them in their discourse.
"Terrors can pass through anything. They aren't made of normal matter. The only thing they can't pass through is electricity."
"Right, I remember that." The Sentinel thought for a bit. "You've electrified the shields, right?" Neither the general nor Daru responded. "Oh, come on, you don't want a repeat of last time again, do you?" The Sentinel waited for an answer. "Hold on, I'm getting a message." The general pressed down on her earpiece. "Right. Uh-huh. Okay, alright. Battle station's ready." She stood straight and saluted the Sentinel, surprising him. "They're here. It's go time." The Sentinel looked up at the shield gate, and near it were several massive Andromedan attack ships, hundreds of smaller fighters, and one Gar ship. He flared his back, and the flaming plasma wings extended from his shoulder blades. Amara, you stay here with the box. The Sentinel set the box down and extended its dome. You got this. With a flap of his wings, he launched himself into the sky. When he was close enough to the shield gate, he noticed that the fighters were firing at it, trying to weaken it. He couldn't think of a way through, but he soon discovered the entrance on the side of the massive gate. He flew in and ran up several flights of stairs. He stopped in his tracks when the slight rumbling of the gate-frame space station stopped, and so did the laser fire. A moment later, the laser fire continued, more intensely. The gate frame shook harder. He continued to run up the stairs, but before he could make it to the exit, the door was blown off by laser fire. He ducked behind the corridor's entrance as quickly as he could. They had redirected their fire to the gate frame itself to break the shield. He folded his wings in front of him and solidified them, like a hard, sharp, flaming metal. He walked outside of the gate, deflecting laser fire from his metallic wings. He held out his hand and snapped his finger. A fighter ship in front of him exploded, and its debris hit a few other ships. One of them went down and crash-landed onto the shield gate. With enough of a distraction to the ships, a small window of a lack of laser fire allowed the Sentinel to let his guard down. His wings became flame again, and he flew up into the empty space outside the shields. He looked around for any sign of the Gar ship. He knew that's where Rogar would be. He turned his attention to a few dozen small objects making their way toward the shield gate. Terrors, he grumbled to himself. He held up his arms, and a ball of bright white plasma charged between his hands. He shot his arms out forward, and a massive bolt of electric plasma launched itself into the shield gate, electrifying it whole. When the electricity had settled, he noticed that a few terrors were able to make their way through in time. The Sentinel cursed in a mumble, and he looked back and forth between the many ships and the few terrors. Weighing in his mind which was the bigger problem to deal with, he ultimately decided that the army down on the ground could deal with the terrors just fine. He flew in between the ships and made his way as quickly as he could to the Gar ship. He landed on top, near a locked hatch. A plasma crystal blade extended from his wrist, and he stabbed it into the metal of the ship, burning and melting through it. He moved his hand around in a circular motion, and when the metal was cut, he kicked it in, making an entrance for himself. Alarm sounded the second he entered, and he was quickly met with guarding score lions. A few blasts of plasma knocked out a couple of them. Another jumped from behind the Sentinel and pinned him down to the ground. The score lion opened its mouth, and a light glow in the back of its throat, followed by a charging sound, startled the Sentinel. He dodged his head out of the way, and the score lion blasted a beam of lightning into the floor. The Sentinel used his wrist blades to slice at the score lion's foot, and he wedged himself away from underneath it. He rolled away, and a beam of energy continued to fire, trying to find his way to the Sentinel. He sprouted his wings and folded them in front of him, solidifying them. It absorbed the electricity, and he folded them away. He swept his arms upwards, and a wall of plasma decapitated the score lion. The score lion paced around him, unaffected. The Sentinel dodged impalement from its tail jab a few times. He hopped up on his feet, arms up and ready to fight. He swung back directly into the head socket of the score lion. His hand burst into flames, and it burst the score lion open from the inside. Lightning, he whispered to himself. Interesting. He turned around and continued down the massive, Gar-accommodating hallway. He was quickly stopped by just the Gar he was looking for.
Paradox Master!
Rogar hissed.
Where's the Sentinel?
I'm the Sentinel. Long story. Long, confusing story. Actually, I have a question for you if you don't mind. Rogar grimaced. He wasn't in the mood for the Sentinel's games. Why lightning? In the score lions. Seems not very energy efficient or accurate, but the Sentinel took a few steps back. The Alliance is falling apart, isn't it? Rogar backed up, worry in his massive eyes. Consciousness after you, and you're afraid the Terrors might fight back. They're loyal to no one. The Sentinel's fist ignited with plasma, ready to fight.
You can't prove anything.
You're trying to conquer worlds while also infighting. You're on your last legs. A message beamed through the speakers throughout the ship. Shield gate down, we are go for entry. Shield gate down. Rogar smiled an awful smile and swung his tail at the Sentinel. Plasma crystal shrapnel launched themselves at him. He spread his wings and folded them in front of him, no time to solidify, burning the crystals upon entry. The Sentinel blasted a concentrated beam of plasma at Rogar, which he dodged, but that's what he wanted. The beam blasted through the front of the ship, and the Sentinel expanded the beam by spreading his arms. The entire front of the ship disintegrated. Rogar slid out of the opening like a snake and into open space. The Sentinel flapped his wings and launched himself back into space through the opening. He flew after Rogar as he made his way to the gate. A few of the ships had already made it past. The Sentinel spun himself past Rogar and floated in place before the gate. A ship made its way to him, mere feet from crashing into him. He clapped his hands, and a plasmatic vertical shockwave shot its way through the ship, splitting it directly in half down the middle. The two halves of the ship passed right by the Sentinel, and Rogar followed behind the pieces. The Sentinel prepared to clap again, but Rogar was too smart. He had seen what it had done already. Rogar shapeshifted into something so small the Sentinel couldn't see, and he hesitated to clap. Rogar appeared behind him and smacked the Sentinel with his tail. The Sentinel's wings were snuffed out, and the pain in his back distracted him. He began to fall, back to the surface of Janistar. Rogar followed after him, and the two pieces of the sliced ship fell alongside them. For some reason, the Sentinel couldn't flare his wings back, and he was free-falling. The box down on the surface took notice, and its protection scripts took control. Its shield over Amara lowered, and it bumped into her, teleporting her away. The Sentinel held out his Revstone amulet, and a wormhole opened up on the ground beneath him. He fell through, and Rogar stopped in his tracks as the wormhole closed. The two pieces of the ship crashed into the ground, and the Sentinel was sent flying out of the other end of the wormhole, launched into the air until he landed on a building, safely. The box and Amara flashed next to him. What just happened? Amara looked around, confused. Wormholes. The Sentinel shook himself, and breathed out heavily. He was pumping himself up, his adrenaline rushing. Where even are we? Amara looked around.
Victorian London.
The box twirled. So it's that kind of day, isn't it? The Sentinel turned around, grabbed Amara by the hand, and pulled her close. The box floated near his shoulder, and they flashed away, reappearing on Janistar, surrounded by what was left of the crashed ship. Rogar turned around at the sound.
You never make it easy, do you? You always have to show off.
Rogar blasted the Sentinel with a ball of plasma, which the Sentinel easily deflected, his arm aflame. The Sentinel blasted a beam of electric plasma towards Rogar from his hand, and Rogar deflected it with a shield of plasma. Both of them stopped firing at each other for a moment.
You're an idiot for bringing the girl.
Rogar twitched his head quickly like a bird towards Amara.
You're handing me what I want on a platter. Both the girl and the planet will be mine.
Rogar slithered around, getting uncomfortably close to the Sentinel. Amara whipped out her pistol and shot at Rogar, catching him off guard and hitting him in the face. Rogar screamed in pain and whipped his tail. Amara! The Sentinel flung his arms up and a pillar of plasma erected itself under Amara, pushing her into the air. Rogar's tail broke through the plasma and hit the Sentinel. The pillar took the brunt of the force, and Amara fell. The Sentinel's wings spread again, and he jumped up after Amara, caught her, and landed safely. The box floated down and formed the shield again. Seed shield, the Sentinel instructed.
Affirmative.
The box changed its shield mode. The Sentinel and Rogar paced around in a circle around each other, waiting for each other to make the first move.
This world will die, just like the last.
Rogar continued his circling, his face bleeding. I won't let that happen again.
You were your own demise.
Rogar hissed.
You will be your ultimate downfall.
He snapped back. Your alliance is falling apart, I beg to differ. Suddenly, Rogar was tackled to the ground by a massive, six-legged, four-eyed green beast with a long, slender tail. He was pushed into the ground by the beast's massive horns. The Sentinel stepped back in fear, despite the feeling he had that he could trust the beast. He had to be cautious. Amara watched in fear as the dueling monsters grew closer and closer to her safety shield. The beast pushed Rogar up against the seed shield, inching closer and closer as they pushed against each other. Rogar's back spike edged its way into the shield, burning as it touched its edges. Rogar pushed back, plasma surrounded his tail, and it solidified. He jabbed his tail into the beast's abdomen, and the beast fell to the ground. Rogar floated upwards, his back spike cracked and burned, and his face bleeding. Defeated, he fled through his portal. The beast groaned and shrank. Its 6 muscle-packed legs diminished into stubs. His tail shortened and fattened. The Sentinel realized what was happening after the horns receded into nothing. Daru? He ran towards the body. Amara lowered the shield and followed after him. The fighting continued around them, but the Sentinel decided to assess Daru instead. Daru, that was amazing. How did you do that?
Every Lyrinian,
He coughed.
has a secret.
His eyes blinked out of order in quick intervals.
I'm sorry I couldn't defend the planet.
Daru, that's what I'm here for.
Take care of them. The people.
Daru couldn't hold the weight of his head anymore, and it dropped to the ground, wafting up dust. His slug-like body fell limp. He's dead. The Sentinel stood up. That was Daru? That thing? I think he just entrusted the planet to me. The Sentinel looked up into the sky. The ships were spreading out. They're headed to the cities. This was just their access point. What do we do? Nothing until you hand me that stone. A voice beckoned. Conchna. The Sentinel turned around, recognizing the voice immediately. What do you want? Ever since I saw that stone, I realized where Rogar was going wrong. He's after time, but that, Conchna pointed to Matrona's Revstone around the Sentinel's neck. That's priceless. Conchna readied his rifle. And dangerous. You can't have it, Amara yelled from the shield. Lay a finger on it and I'll kill you. She pointed the gun at Conchna. No one should have power over Revstones, especially you, Sentinel. Oh, and you should? The Sentinel questioned Conchna. I know how to use it correctly, safely. You barely even understand how it works, Conchna yelled. Oh, and you do. The Sentinel stood defensively. Constantine gestured toward a small purple stone forged into the side of his rifle. More than you could imagine. Constantine shot at the Sentinel, and a wormhole opened up beneath him. Before the Sentinel fell in, he lassoed Constantine with him, and the two of them traveled through the wormhole and appeared on the other end. The Sentinel looked around. Wormholes were opening left and right, jail cells stretched for what seemed to be an infinite distance, explosions littered the place, and the Sentinel recognized where they were. Constantine and the Sentinel engaged in a fistfight, but were swiftly interrupted by a wormhole opening near them. A falling body passed through. Constantine kicked the Sentinel toward a wall and shot a wormhole behind him. Constantine tackled the Sentinel into the wormhole and came with him. They were launched outward, sideways onto a tropical beach. The Sentinel landed on a folding beach chair, breaking it. Beachgoers in 90s swimsuits ran for their lives, and the Sentinel and Constantine continued fighting. The Sentinel cupped his hands and pushed Constantine with a ball of plasma into a wormhole that opened up behind him, created with the Sentinel's amulet. The Sentinel jumped in after him. He wanted to make sure Constantine didn't escape with his life. Not this time. He was becoming too unpredictable and dangerous. The wormhole led them to a massive lake of lava on a planet with a burning orange sky. They both stood on top of floating chunks of rock in a massive expanse of lava. Constantine shot open a wormhole underneath the Sentinel, and he jumped in with him. They fell through the portal and found themselves falling through the sky. They both landed roughly on top of a high school at its highest point. They continued fighting, the Sentinel bombarding Constantine with all types of plasma, Constantine dodging and punching and shooting. The Sentinel kicked Constantine off the building, and before he hit the ground, Constantine managed to create a wormhole. The Sentinel had already thought ahead and jumped in with him. Both of them continued to fight in the blue sand dunes of a faraway planet with 2.5 suns, until the Sentinel finally got the upper hand on Constantine. He grabbed his rifle and pinned him to the ground. The Sentinel snapped the rifle in half with his knee, and the Revstone flew into the air, and he caught it. "How did you get this? Whose is it?" "Give that back, you don't know what you're dealing with." "Only those who can control plasma can make a Revstone. Whose is this?" The Sentinel approached Constantine. He backed up in the strange sand. The Sentinel pushed the stone into his pocket. "Not gonna answer, huh?" The Sentinel pointed his arm out toward Constantine's face, his palm glowing. "Whose is it?" Constantine's eyes darted to the Sentinel's jacket. "I found it in a cave, next to a dead man." Constantine smiled and quickly snapped his arm up to his chest like some sort of salute and pressed down on his cufflink. He teleported away. The Sentinel stood, alone on the desert planet, with virtually no way to get back. Wormholes were a tricky practice, very unreliable. What would the Paradox Master do? He asked himself. What would I do? Same thing. He paced around, frustrated. He left Amara alone on Janistar. He left Janistar alone in the midst of a battle. He hit his head with the base of his palm repeatedly. The hot air didn't help his decision-making. Where am I, actually? He looked around. Interesting place. No life, assuming. A mechanical flash sounded behind him. The box whirled behind him. "Box, you're a lifesaver!" The Sentinel jumped for his box. He flashed away and appeared near Amara and his box, creating the shield. When the box noticed the Sentinel returned with the box, it vanished, to go retrieve the Sentinel. What just happened? Amara stood up from her crouching position. Magic. The Sentinel let go of the box, letting it float. He held out for Amara's hand, and they ran. Where are we going? She struggled to keep up with him. The city. The Sentinel's wings spread from his back, and his legs lifted off the ground. He reached out for Amara's other arm and hoisted her up. They flew to the nearest city where the ships had begun their attack. Sentinel, what do I do? Amara yelled over the sounds of battle. The Sentinel hesitated for a second. He landed on top of a skyscraper and took off his amulet. Take this. He handed Amara Matrona's Revstone. She put on the necklace. I don't know why I didn't give it to you sooner. It is Matrona, after all. I don't know how to use it. It'll show you. The Sentinel nodded. He jumped off the skyscraper and flew off. He stopped in front of a ship, and he clapped his hands, horizontally this time. All of the large ships at the same level were instantly split in half. 7 down? The Sentinel watched as hundreds of smaller fighter ships dove and spun and weaved through the city's buildings. A lot to go. The Sentinel flew to the nearest ship and wedged himself into it with a plasma hook. He burned through the hinges, holding the cockpit window on, and flung it open. He threw an Andromedan from the ship and jumped in himself. How do I work this thing? The Sentinel clumsily flew the ship around, shooting down a few ships successfully. The army surrounding the city below were able to knock down a few ships as well, but no one knew that the Sentinel was in one of them. The tail of the Sentinel's ship was hit from below. He pushed up on the cockpit window with his legs, popping it off. The ship was about to hit the ground when he leapt from his seat and landed off to the side, rolling away, barely escaping. He looked up. A squadron of 20 or so ships flew by, directly into a wormhole opened for a few seconds. The Sentinel turned his head and looked up to the building where he left Amara. She jumped up and down excitedly. He smiled and extended his wings again. Ships began to retreat, back to the gate station. The gate started to close and the ships crashed into it, exploding. Only a few made it through and escaped. The Sentinel landed next to Amara. We've scared him off. Let's go home. Amara's pleading eyes locked on the Sentinel. We should tell them about Daru, the Sentinel sighed. They know. A voice caught the attention of the two of them. Foxtrot, what are you doing here? The Sentinel turned around. Foxtrot had made his way up the building into the roof. Who is this? Amara asked. A rebel clone previously from the Andromedan army. I'm a spy now. Foxtrot shuffled his way over, which leads into what I need to tell you. What? The Sentinel spoke softly with a slight presence of concern in his voice. Rogar's going insane. The Terrors are questioning their position in the Alliance, and Conchna is working on some sort of weapon. We still don't know if it's to take care of you or Rogar. What do you mean by Rogar's gone insane? The Sentinel raised an eyebrow and pushed his fingers through his hair. He's killed all of the Gars. He's the last one. That doesn't make any sense. He's trying to protect the Gars. Yeah, I thought so too. The Sentinel and Amara set off to visit Elysium 2. The moment they arrived, they couldn't help but notice the war zone-like nature of the place. Eternal flames burned on anything flammable. Explosion craters scattered the once relatively flat landscape. Bodies of dead, burning Gars littered the vast expanse. This is a good thing for us, right? Amara asked, hopeful. I mean, with less Gars and potential infighting, you could win this war, right? The Sentinel looked down at the ground. He picked up a broken remote with only a singular red button and examined it, confused. He did this. Alone. The Sentinel looked over the bodies. He's testing his strength. The Sentinel kneeled down, feeling the dirt, and let go of the remote. If he could do this to other Gars, what does he need an alliance for? Imagine what he could do to Janistar. The Sentinel stared off in the distance. He thought he saw a figure standing in a cloud of dust. The figure's coattails blew in the wind, and in place of his head was some sort of rectangular helmet. The Sentinel blinked, and the figure was gone. He shook his head and flashed away with Amara.